Okay, so over the past 5 weeks, we've been practicing the 4 protective meditations. And so I just want to close with some words to wrap up what we've been doing, and then to explain how to integrate these practices into your regular meditation practice. Okay, so these 4 meditation subjects are included amongst the many topics of meditation that were taught by the Buddha. But in the Theravada tradition, the 4 have been sort of selected out and then put into this group called protective meditations. Chatur Araka in Pali. And they're called this because each of them performs a particular, what I call a protective function in our spiritual development. And the list, traditionally it begins with Buddhanussati, recollection of the Buddha, because the set of 4 has been taught to those who are traditionally Buddhist, and so one begins with strengthening one's confidence or trust in the Buddha as the spiritual teacher, as the unsurpassed spiritual teacher. And this becomes extremely important because you could say that it protects one as one is cultivating the path, because there come times of, say, periods, sometimes of doubt, dejection, if one is not making the progress that one expected, uncertainty, wavering, temptations to give up the practice and then to revert just to lead a very ordinary worldly life. And so it's one's trust and confidence in the Buddha that continually spurs one to continue along this path of practice. And for those who have what's called a faith temperament or a devotional temperament, the recollection of the Buddha can become a very powerful and effective means of leading towards samadhi. And this is because one of the factors that leads most directly to samadhi is joy. And so if one is doing something like mindfulness of breathing, just attending breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, it definitely has its benefits, but sometimes the mind can become a bit dry and rigid. But when one takes the recollection of the Buddha and turns the qualities of the Buddha over in one's mind, then it brings up this swelling up of joy in the mind. And joy leads to happiness, to a sense of contentment, even to bliss. And on the basis of that joy and bliss, it becomes much easier to slide into samadhi. And the samadhi can be developed with the Buddha himself as the object of meditation. It's said that the recollection of the Buddha itself does not lead to jhana, to full absorption. But let's not quibble and think it's either full absorption or else, either full absorption or bust. But recollection of the Buddha can lead to the state approaching jhana, the state that's called upachara samadhi, access concentration. And so if one can develop access concentration based on the Buddha, then it becomes much easier to transfer over to one of the meditation subjects that will lead directly to full absorption, to jhana. Whereas if one is trudging along with great difficulty, with mindfulness of breathing or attention to the sensations, then it can become more difficult to gain concentration. Okay, so the second protective meditation is loving kindness. And loving kindness is a protective meditation because it's considered the direct antidote towards ill will, hatred, and resentment. So these, ill will, resentment, that is a very powerful hindrance which blocks progress in meditation. And not only does it block progress in meditation, but when ill will, anger, and hatred take possession of the mind, then one can engage in many types of unwholesome actions, speaking harshly to others, competing aggressively with others, denigrating others, even engaging in physical violence. And all of that, not only does it harm one's meditation, but it sort of burns up and destroys a lot of one's accumulations of merit, and it creates powerful, unwholesome karma that will create an obstruction to one's progress. And so in this way, by developing loving kindness, then one develops an openness of heart, an ability to empathize with others, and so it blocks the entryway of anger and ill will into the mind, and it creates this wonderful feeling of unity with others and empathy with others, and it also opens the gateway to compassion and altruistic joy, two of the other immeasurable qualities of mind. And loving kindness, like recollection of the Buddha, also brings up joy and happiness into the mind, and thereby it makes it much easier to gain samadhi. So the Buddha mentions as one of the benefits of loving kindness meditation that cittang sukhang samadhiyati, the mind becomes concentrated easily. So this is one of the benefits of loving kindness meditation and the way it protects our practice. Okay, the third protective meditation is the meditation on the unattractive nature of the body. And as I said, this meditation was originally prescribed by the Buddha for those who have just newly entered upon the monastic life. Because one of the big obstacles when one goes forth into the monastic life is sexual desire. You know, just because you shave the head and put on robes, it doesn't mean that sexual desire goes away. And so what the Buddha taught, especially for novices, is this meditation on the 32 parts of the body, which helps to gradually to weaken the pull of sensual desire. And sensual desire is also one of the 5 hindrances, one of the obstacles to concentration. And so by developing, even occasionally, the meditation on the parts of the body, it will put a damper on sensual desire. It will incline the mind in the direction of renunciation, detachment from sensual desire, and this will facilitate the path to deeper concentration and then to samadhi. Then the meditation on death, the recollection or the mindfulness of death, serves as a counter. It protects us from falling into what is called heedlessness or negligence, from leading a life of just worldly enjoyments, just falling into worldly complacency, being satisfied with the day-to-day routine of our daily lives. But when we do the recollection of death, then we're reminded that death can take place at any time, and this serves as a spur that keeps us engaged in the practice. So in this way, these 4 function as protections of the mind in our process of cultivation. So how does one integrate these practices into one's regular meditation practice? I recommend always as using as one's primary meditation practice what we might call a non-conceptual technique, something like mindfulness of breathing, even though one uses some conceptualization, but it's what I would call a colorless or a colorless meditation subject. And that helps to bring to one's attention, to remind one, to enable one to see how one's mind is functioning. And thereby it helps in understanding oneself and in shaping the mind. So, as I recommend one continue to use a non-conceptual object, mindfulness of breathing, observing rise and fall of the abdomen, attention to the bodily sensations as the primary object. But you can include in your period of meditation practice, from time to time, one of these 4 protective meditations. Maybe include a 10-minute period which you devote to one of the 4 protective meditations, whichever one you prefer, or whichever one you see the need for. If you're tending to get angry frequently or to be bearing ill will, then loving kindness. If you want to put to dampen the force of sensual desire, do the parts of the body. If one is getting lazy and negligent, recollection of death. And if one wants to arouse the joy of faith and devotion, mindfulness of the Buddha. And so you can add this, as a 10-minute period into your regular meditation practice, or alternatively, from time to time, say for a period of a week, you could put aside your regular meditation object and just take up one of these 4 protective meditations and use that as your primary object for the period of the week. Then at the end of the week, put it down and take up the original object and maybe include that protective meditation in a 10-minute period in your day-to-day practice.